MS-13 is a menace. Yet Ralph Northam voted in favor of sanctuary cities that let dangerous illegal immigrants back on the street, increasing the threat of MS-13. Ralph Northam's policies are dangerous.
I'm Ed Gillespie, candidate for governor, and I sponsored this ad for a safer, stronger Virginia.
Now, the ad you just heard is from the campaign of Ed Gillespie, a former Republican National Committee chair and counselor to President George W. Bush. He's facing off against Democratic Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam in the crucial race for Virginia governor on Tuesday. Polls are showing an extremely tight race. The Real Clear Politics polling average gives Northam a narrow 1.2 percentage point lead over Gillespie. And it's because Gillespie's ads, though often misleading, seem to be working, echoing the fear-mongering rhetoric against immigrants that worked like a charm for Donald Trump. Joel Benenson is back with me, and now joining me is Krystal Ball, author of Reversing the Apocalypse, Hijacking the Democratic Party to Save the World, and Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com. Let's talk a little bit about these ads. So we know that Ed Gillespie has hired a former Trump staffer who worked Trump's Virginia campaign, actually the field director for the Trump campaign. And they've done that field director, with that field director in tow, Ed Gillespie has sharpened the distinctions between him and Northam on things like Confederate monuments and running ads that really do push up against issues of race. So I want to first play an ad that the Latino Victory Fund ran, pushing back on the ways in which Ed Gillespie has really gone to the far, far, far right on things like race and sanctuary cities. Here's the Latino Victory Fund ad.
Is this what Donald Trump and Ed Gillespie mean by the American dream?
Okay, so that ad actually was pulled on Tuesday after a terrorist attack in New York City that involved a pickup truck actually hitting people for real. But that was that ad. Now, this is the rebuttal ad from Ed Gillespie's campaign, and it's kind of his closing argument ad as well. Take a look.
This new attack ad from a Democratic group.
Single most disgusting, unfair thing I've ever seen.
Calling people that don't agree with you white supremacists is totally out of bounds.
This ad presumes Virginia voters are really stupid and that they would be suckered in by something this despicable.
Ralph Northam doesn't just disagree with millions of Virginians who don't share his liberal policy agenda. He disdains us.
Krystal, those ads seem to be working. Ed Gillespie seems to be gaining with this argument that they just think you're deplorable. It seems to be working with white voters in Virginia. What do you think?
I think I have a really queasy feeling in my stomach about this race. And look, I'm still cautiously optimistic that because of the energy that we see on the left across the country, Northam will still be able to pull this out. But make no mistake, this looks a lot like Trump and Clinton. Look, the Republicans, we know what they stand for. It's these culture wars, it's racism and tax cuts. The Democrats, you know, the problem with Ralph Northam isn't that he is racist or that he doesn't know where he stands on sanctuary cities. It's that people don't know where he stands on anything. He has tried to reinvent himself for this moment, and it has led to a tremendous lack of enthusiasm. So, yeah, the Gillespie playbook has really worked in this case, and I just hope that we can hold on.
And, you know, Jason, it's interesting. You wrote a piece for The Root called Conservatives Shed White Tears Over Political Ads, calling out Ed Gillespie's racist ads. You've also had this weird thing happening where liberal groups have walked away from Northam because he has dropped support for sanctuary cities, where Ralph Northam apparently put out campaign flyers that don't have his black running mate on them.
Yes.
What is going on in Virginia?
So, Joy, this is the thing, and I want people to understand this. I'm right next to Virginia. I see some of the local ads. I talk to a lot of people in the campaigns. Look, the demographics suggest Ralph Northam probably still squeaks out a win, and it's going to be a late night. Everyone who thinks we're going to know this by 9 o'clock doesn't know how Virginia gubernatorial races work. But the larger issue is this. If he does lose, it's not necessarily because Ed Gillespie has managed to tap into the DNA of bigots in Northern Virginia. It's because Ralph Northam has made some very serious mistakes. Leaving Justin Fairfax off of campaign literature and then turning around and saying that Fairfax had actually signed off on it, that angered a lot of the enthusiastic supporters of Justin Fairfax. coming out 5 days before an election and saying, I'm not in favor of sanctuary cities. There are no sanctuary cities in Virginia. He didn't need to step into that. That's the problem. Northam has allowed Gillespie to sort of control the narrative and respond, and that hasn't been smart. But I don't think it's necessarily just because of MSN 13. This is a very local race, and there are local mistakes that may determine who wins.
And then there's something that you will recall, Joel, from the campaign that you worked on, the Hillary Clinton campaign. We now have the bots have arrived in Virginia. Twitter bots swarming into the Virginia governor's race, promoting chatter about a racially charged Democratic ad buy days before the election, according to a report commissioned by allies of Lieutenant Governor Northam. The reaction has been amplified by automated bot accounts. Out of the 15 accounts tweeting most frequently about the Latino Victory Fund ad, 13 of the 15 belong to fully or partially automated bots, according to an intelligence estimate. So now we have that activity transferred into a local race.
Right. And the danger here is that we've ignored what happened in the presidential race to an extent, with a president who seems to want to live in this fiction that Russians didn't meddle with our elections. They did. His campaign colluded with them. That evidence is building up every day. And the threat was they would do it over and over again in other democracies. And now it could be happening at a state level, because when bots are engaged, there are some nefarious players involved. But I think Jason's assessment of what's happening on the ground in Virginia on a macro level is what strikes me about it from afar, that Northam has let Gillespie control the final week of the conversation. Not a great place to be. You always expect it to be tight. I think historically, if you look at the states that have governor's races the year after a presidential, New Jersey and Virginia, typically they have elected a person from the party that didn't win in the presidential race. In fact, Terry McAuliffe in 2013 was an exception to that. That being said, there is dissatisfaction on both sides. You've got people like Al Cardenas, a well-known conservative, Bruce Bartlett, who said, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to vote for my good friend Ed Gillespie because he's pandering to racism and neo-Confederates. And I think, Virginia is a moderate state. It's a purple state. And I think at the end of the day, I think Northam may squeeze out a close race here. But this is going to be 1 to 2 points. I think Jason's right. We are not going to know at 9 o'clock where this thing
We're going to be hanging out with Steve Kornacki while he does the swipey board till late at night. And Krystal, you run for office in Virginia. You know the state very well. Are the Democrats making a mistake by chasing after the Virginia suburbs and thinking that they can get suburban white women, which is the same playbook that Hillary Clinton tried to run, rather than scooping up the base?
I think they need to stand for something. I mean, think about the fact that Bernie Sanders, right, probably the furthest to the left politician in the Democratic Party, is also the most popular politician in the Democratic Party, not because he's so far to the left, but because he stands for something. And that's the problem. We continue to run these candidates. We had Jack Conway here in Kentucky. We had Hillary Clinton, and now we've got Ralph Northam, who people think that they're full of it. They don't trust what they're saying. And so it doesn't resonate with anyone, with the base, with white suburban women, with the people in the mountains that we want to win back. It doesn't resonate with anyone.
Yeah, and I think we need to update some polls on that.
Hillary Clinton did win Virginia, by the way, and she won by appealing to suburban white women also. And I think winning, and Tim Kaine did that when he won the governor's race in Virginia. So I think I wouldn't make such a sweeping statement about suburban voters. I think Democrats do well when they can speak to their core constituencies, the part of the base of the party that's active, but also appeal to some of those suburban voters who don't like what they hear from the Republican Party.
And Jason, so then how does this monument thing wind up playing? I mean, Charlottesville took place, obviously, in Virginia. Does this wind up actually sort of, I think it gives a lot of people a sick feeling in their stomach to think about it, but does the monument thing wind up helping elect Gillespie?
If Gillespie gets elected, like I said, I think it's Northam's race to lose. I still think he's in the lead. But here's the other thing. Look, if you're in Centerville, if you're in Mechanicsville, if you're in some of these suburban towns in Virginia, you're not necessarily worried about the monuments. You're worried about the ads that Gillespie ran that says, hey, Northam wants to give guns to pedophiles. I think one of the things that people have to remember, I mean, he literally ran an ad saying that, is that, Northern Virginia, like a lot of other states that have multiple media markets, some of the press that you're seeing nationally is not what people are seeing in different parts of the state. So that's why this becomes an issue of the ground game. And when you have mistakes like Northam has made, which is like, look, DFA doesn't want to work with you because of what you said, and you've got Liuna who wants to knock Justin Fairfax, you're alienating your base right before the election. Again, if you look at the primaries, the Democrats should probably win. But if they win, it'll be in spite of mistakes that the head of the ticket has made.
And do you all think, and I'll just go through very quickly around the table, Krystal, if Gillespie is able to win this way by essentially being a carbon copy of Donald Trump. He's from New Jersey, but he's pretending to be this sort of defender of the Confederacy. If he wins that way,
in Virginia.
Yeah, does that wind up spreading to the whole GOP?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And listen, Gillespie is a numbers guy. I'm sure they're looking at numbers that are telling them this is the way to go. And it's a little bit unusual because it's an off-year election, but this is where the energy is in the Republican Party, and they draw the Democrats into these cultural battles rather than focusing on pocketbook issues. And look, it's working.
Is that a depressing sort of, kind of diagnosis of the Republican Party going forward? That essentially they've decided that they were fighting Trumpism a year ago, but now they've decided to embrace it.
Oh, I think long-term the consequences for the Republican Party are not to be underestimated. I think they will pay a price for this. It's not where the country is. We're becoming more diverse, not less diverse. It will divide us. It will harm us in terms of getting things done because they're playing these culture wars. But long-term trends in this country, they are behind where this country is going.
Yeah.
And so we have to do a better job as Democrats about winning on Election Day. I think we have more opportunities where we can win, and we can't squander them. And hopefully Tuesday we'll win the governor's races in New Jersey and Virginia. And I think Virginia is going to be particularly important because it is a swing state. We have to be able to win in places like Virginia.
It's a swing state where you would give Ed Gillespie and his new Trumpy friends the ability to redistrict.
Correct.
And draw the gerrymandering lines for Virginia for 10 years. Jason Johnson, you do know that, obviously the demographics are only going in one direction, but even if short term this is working for the Republican Party, is this sort of a gold water moment for the party in terms of where it has placed itself on the spectrum on issues of race and demography?
Look, if you can win a gubernatorial election by pandering to people who committed a racist attack in the town of your flagship state university, I think we should all be looking for passports. That's a very, very bad sign, right? And I think the Virginia voters are probably smarter than that. That's why I think some of these issues may actually be more local than some of these national conversations. But we can't forget, New Jersey is about to sweep out everybody with an R in their name, right? And that was a state that Chris Christie dominated for years, both culturally and politically. So I don't necessarily think that a Gillespie win means that everybody's going to be running around in a Confederate flag. I think that there's some very unique issues going on in the state, and we got to be careful, just like with Ossoff in Georgia and some of these other races, with sort of presuming that this is a trend as opposed to it might be local.
Very good point. A great panel. Joel Benenson, Krystal Ball, Jason Johnson. You guys are great. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Joy.
And up next.